it is time for possibly my most requested video ever on this channel, and that is Lesbian reads straight girl fantasy. I'm doing it, guys. I'm gonna read ACOTAR. I'm doing it. And Fourth Wing as well, of course. I am not a fantasy girly. I don't think I've read and enjoyed a fantasy book since I was about 15 years old. So this is big for me. I'm being really, really brave. If you're new around here, hi, my name's Georgia and I talk about gay books on the internet. I read a lot of books, most of them are gay, and this is part of my Lesbian Read series where I, a lesbian woman, read straight romance books and critique them for your entertainment pleasure. So yeah, this is going to be a pretty big one, I think. I am scared. I've had some people telling me they think I'll actually really enjoy these books, other people telling me I should never ever read them because I will not enjoy them. So we're going to find out together. I have absolutely no concept of how gay these books are. I don't know if there are any queer characters whatsoever. I'm going in completely and utterly blind. So join me on my journey. Also, just want to say, people love to have a go at me in my comments, like, why do you read these books if you know you're going to hate them? Guys, my job is to provide entertaining content on the internet, and if that involves me occasionally reading a book that I don't think I'm going to like, then that's what I will do for you guys, because I'm nice like that. And through this series, I have actually found lots of books I didn't think I would enjoy that I did enjoy. The Love Hypothesis, loved that. The Paradise Problem, really loved that. I've also hated a lot of books. It swings and roundabouts. For better or for worse, social media is my real life job, and actually, you know what, that leads me on very nicely to talk about what I want to talk about next, and that's Skillshare. With my whole content rebrand that I seem to be doing recently, as I turn more to my queer book content, my lifestyle style content, I've been really needing to up my social media game. I don't really want to rely solely on YouTube for my income anymore, so I've been sort of working towards creating better content across all of my platforms, Instagram, TikTok. I want to build a strategy and just make sure that my posts reach the people that they need to reach. And that's exactly why I've been diving into Powerful Social Media Marketing from Beginner to Advanced by Maggie Stara on Skillshare. In this course, Maggie walks you through setting up an entire brand from scratch. We're talking bios, graphics, animations, captions, hashtags, and even how to use AI tools to help streamline the entire process. Whether you're looking to grow your own brand, which is me, I suppose, or start a career in social media management, this course is packed with value. I am clearly not a beginner in all this. I've been doing social media for many years now, but it's very easy to fall behind when everything is constantly changing so quickly. So this has really been a great workout for my brain. If you're not familiar, Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of expert-led classes covering everything from film and illustration to design, productivity, even entrepreneurship. They also have learning paths, which are these curated course collections to help you master a specific skill step by step. Skillshare is all about treating creativity like a muscle. It's something that you train, you grow, and you build over time. Whether it's animation, branding, or launching a side hustle, Skillshare makes it very easy to flex those creative skills and take them to the next level. So, if you're ready to practice your creativity, Skillshare is offering an amazing deal for you guys. The first 500 people to join using my link in the description box down below will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So go check it out, start learning, and make 2025 the year you level up your creativity. Honestly, I love Skillshare, cannot recommend it enough. Go and check it out using the link. And now the question is, which one of these books do I start with? I'm scared. You know what, I think we'll start with Fourth Wing, get the big chunky one out of the way, and then this one is slightly smaller. Still many pages though. Oh no, 400 pages. That's not too bad. How many pages is this one? 550 pages. Okay, I'm going in. Wish me luck. Oh, you guys, it has been a weekend with me and this book, with me and Fourth Wing. I'm going to come straight off the bat. I'm going to say it. I don't hate this. I really don't hate this book. I don't think I'm loving it. I don't necessarily think I'm going to rush out to read the rest of the series. But I thought I'd dislike it more than I do because just generally I'm not a fantasy girly. I don't really love fantasy. This is so fine. It's fine. I'm doing it. I'm halfway through as it stands. I'm currently on page 271. And I will admit that I really hated this book up until about page 150, 160. I just was not, I didn't get it. It was a slog, all the world building. I think that's my biggest problem with fantasy books in general, the world building. I just do not have the patience. I don't care to learn about the rules of this world and the way this new world works. Like, I just don't care. So the first 150 pages, I was fighting through. I could not bring myself to pick this up. And then last night, I hit like page 150, and then I read the next 120 in like an hour. It got good. It got good. She met the dragons. It got good. So the premise of Fourth Wing as it stands at page 270, our main character is Violet Sorrengail. She is the daughter of, is she Captain Sorrengail? Like, she's really high up in this fantasy world. From what I can gather, there's some sort of war going on, and the entire world is at war, and so this country, I guess, it doesn't really explain in detail like what the war is or what the country is. The country is called like Navarre or Navarre, and basically everyone gets to a certain age and has to like go and join a certain career. There's like different careers you can go and join to like help with the war effort or help with like keeping the country going. And Violet was always raised and trained to be a scribe like her father was, only her father then died, and her mum, who is high up in the Navarrian version of the army, she's a rider, forced Violet to go into the Riders Quadrant, just like her older sister and older brother did. But Violet, she's not made for this. She is just a petite, small girl who is not made for riding dragons and going into war. Like, she just wanted to be a scribe, she wanted to keep history. And honestly, girl, I relate, because I am also not that girl. So whilst Violet doesn't really have the physical stature to be a rider, she obviously goes into the Riders Quadrant, and instead of using her, like, brawn, she uses her brain. And that's really good, because the dragons, they like her. I don't want to, like, spoil things in this, but the dragons, it turns out they like her. She is clearly going to go on to be very successful and very good, I would assume. She, like, dragons basically, like, give humans a power. Like, a dragon chooses a human, then gives that human a power, and they're, like, bonded. And I don't know what power Violet is going to get at this point. I assume it's going to be a big one. I assume it's going to be something big, and she's going to be, like, one of the most powerful people ever. Like, it's going that way. It makes sense. But, of course, alongside the dragons, the war, the fantasy, there is a love triangle. Because, of course, there is. Violet has a best friend called Dane Atos, who she grew up with, and Dane is like the year above her in the Riders Quadrant, and he is like clearly in love with her, but Dane is a rule follower, and it's like frowned upon for him to fraternize with people younger than him. Fraternize the right word? He can't necessarily be in relationships with people younger than him, and like people like in a lower chain of command than him. So he's like, I can't, I really like you, but I can't. And there's the evil guy, the bad guy, Xaden Riorson, who is the son of the person who killed Violet's older brother. Like, there's a lot of beef going on there. And she, like, shouldn't hate Xaden, and she thinks that Xaden's going to kill her. But it turns out he's actually really nice, and she, like, really fancies him. 270 pages in, there's been no spice, but the slow burn. Oh my god. Guys, listen, I'm a lesbian. I live for slow burn. I live for anticipation. I live for the lingering touches and the little stares at the corner of the eye. Like, I love all of that. This book with Xaden and Violet, it has that in droves. I am lapping it up. Dane, I don't care about. It's giving very, like, Katniss and Peter and Gale, Hunger Games kind of energy, but with dragons. I don't care about Dane. He is annoying. He's a wet blanket. Like, I just don't give a fuck about him. Xaden is where it's at. You will very rarely find me rooting for a man. I am rooting for Xaden. He's an arsehole, and I'm so into it. That is very me-coded, though. Like, I can only assume when they do finally get together, like, I guess they are going to get together, or they're going to sleep together at some point fairly soon. It seems to be reaching some sort of crescendo here. I will probably start to hate him, because that's who I am. It is the way it is, but we'll see. Okay, so let's talk about the goods, the bads, and the uglies as this book stands at page 270. One bad and ugly, I suppose, is the writing. I am not really gelling with the writing in this book. The story, I'm getting into the story. The writing, it really takes me out of it. It's very, very simplistic at some points. I feel like a lot of it isn't very well explained. Like, there's some things that happen and I'm having to go back like 2 or 3 pages to reread because I'm like, oh, did I miss something? And it turns out I didn't really miss anything. It just wasn't explained very well. I feel like when you are world building like this is, like especially the first 150 pages, you need to be very clear about what's going on because otherwise it just takes the reader out. And yeah, I feel like the simplicity of the writing is probably why this book is so popular, why so many people love it, why so many people have read it. And I know this has been an introduction to a lot of people to the world of reading, which I am not sniffing my nose at all. I think that's amazing. But it takes me out. Also, the language in this book is so heavily Gen Z that I'm like, I don't know how old the characters are in this, like I assume late teens, early 20s. Would they really be using Gen Z 2025 real world language in a book like this, in like a war-torn fantasy world? There was one sentence in particular, and it was so like, it was nothing, like it was really nothing, but I read it and I was like, it just doesn't make sense. Wait, where is it? Okay, so here they're talking about Dane, like the best friend, the really wet blanket, soppy man who I can't stand. And Violet's friend says, he's hot, he has that whole boy next door who can still kick your ass vibe going for him. Violet then fights a smile because she's right. He so does. And I don't know why, that one line just like really, I was like, he so does. That's so Gen Z. And there are so many examples of that in this book. And I don't think that's like a massive criticism, but it just makes me laugh a bit. I don't know. I'm sure maybe by the time I finish this book, I'll have more well-rounded thoughts on that. But he so does. He so does. I also don't feel like Violet, who is the main character, has been very well established in this book. I don't feel like we've ever really got to know her personality very well. All we know about her is she wanted to be a scribe. Her mum then turned around and was like, no, you're going to the Writers' Quadrant, and that was it. She was forced into the Writers' Quadrant, and at first she apparently hated it. It didn't really seem like she hated it. She was just like kind of sucking up and doing it. Dane kept coming along and being like, you can't do this, you're too weak, and trying to like remove her and like take her over to the Scribes Quadrant instead. And she was like, no, I must do this. Why she must do this was never really fully expanded on, I don't think. But from day one, when she was like joining the Riders, she had so many enemies, and you keep being told as a reader that Violet has a way of like pissing people off, or like people are just like mad at her. And part of that is because of who she is as being like the captain's daughter. But also like a lot of it is just like, it's alluded to a lot that Violet's personality kind of pisses people off. But that's never shown. You're just told that as the reader. But I don't think Violet seems to be a particularly annoying person or character or does anything really controversial in this book at all. So I don't really understand that. They keep saying that, and every time they say it, I'm like, what? Why? I don't. It is very much a show, not tell kind of thing. No, tell, not show. You get what I'm trying to say. The author's just like telling you as a reader how to feel without actually showing it in her writing, basically. Some of the good so far in this book, I think, maybe is a representation. And Rihanna, who is Violet's like best friend, closest friend in the immediate quadrant, is bisexual, gay, maybe. There's one point where it's just like mentioned that Rihanna has a thing for a girl called Tara. And that's it. It was just like very much like, I'm just going to drop this in and then we're going to immediately move past it. I recently did a very apparently controversial video on should straight authors be writing queer characters. I don't know if Rebecca Yarros is straight. I have no idea. But I sort of cover a lot of my thoughts and feelings around that kind of representation in that video. I don't know if in this book so far I like that. It's just sort of like thrown in, but also it's only 2 pages so far that has been mentioned that Rhiannon has a thing for Tara. I'm hoping it gets to be explored a little bit more. The word gay or lesbian or bisexual has not been mentioned at any point. Obviously, this sort of comes with a caveat in fantasy worlds where sexuality might be viewed entirely differently, but it hasn't been mentioned how sexuality is viewed in this world. So, I don't know. I'm going to finish this book. I'll have more thoughts on it, I suppose, once I finish the book. But I wish there was a bit more, not focus on the gayness, but just like more than 2 pages, more than 2 lines on 2 pages. Because just throwing it in, it doesn't really do much for representation in general. It needs to be a little bit more explored. But also, it's not a bad thing having that kind of representation in books. I don't know, again, I covered a lot of this in my other video that I did. Disability representation. Violet is a disabled main character. It hasn't been said at any point what Violet's actual disability is. I don't know if that's because Rebecca Yarros didn't want to commit to a certain disability and not represent it right, or if in this fantasy world it wouldn't necessarily be called what it is called in this world. From what I'm reading between the lines, I think Violet has some form of like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome or something like that. Using my real life knowledge, that's kind of the opinion I'm getting of Violet and her disability. Like I said, it's never been said that's what it is, but she has really weak joints. They pop out of place a lot. She has very brittle bones. She's very flexible, very bendy, like hypermobile. And that kind of, in some ways, hurts her journey in the Rider's Quadrant, but also in many ways helps her journey as well. Like, she is a main character. She's not a side character. She is a main character who has all of these limitations, I suppose, but they're not limitations. She just got to adapt and figure out how to make it work for her, and I think that's quite good. If you are disabled, if you have EDS or anything kind of similar to that, then let me know your thoughts in the comments. But yeah, I sort of wasn't expecting that going in. I sort of read it and I was like, oh, okay, that's different. I like that. There's also a deaf character called Jessinia, who is very much a side character, and I really like the way that she was just sort of like subtly dropped in. It was never made to be like a point that Jessinia is deaf, but it's like Violet signs to her, and like Violet's like, oh, I'm trying to think of this sign. Okay, I'm going to spell it out instead. Like, it's not actually said at any point that Jessinia is deaf and Violet needs to like go out of her way to try and make accommodations for her. It's just like Violet signs instead of Violet says, and I really like that. My final point I want to say about this book, as it stands halfway through, is when Mira, so Mira is Violet's older sister, who is like a badass rider, fighter. She's mentioned in like the first few pages, and the way she is described, I'm like, you are my dream woman. I was immediately obsessed with her, and I was like, okay, Mira is so lesbian coded, I'm going to be all over this. And then she's like barely in it. I was very upset. Literally page 3, where is it? At 26 years old, Mira is a younger version of her mother. She's tall, with strong, powerful muscles toned from years of sparring and hundreds of hours spent on the back of her dragon. Like, strong and muscular, tell me more. Her skin practically glows with health, and her golden brown hair is sheared short for combat in the same style as Mum's. But more than looks, she carries the same arrogance, the unwavering conviction that she belongs in the sky. She's a rider through and through. Like, a tall, muscular woman with short, shaved, golden brown hair. Like, I was so into that. I was like, yes, Mira, I want to hear more about you. Like, she is so lesbian coded. And then on, like, the next page, she's talking about sleeping with men. And then she's barely in the book. But, like, 3 pages in, I was like, yes, I'm so into this. Like, I want to hear more. Hopefully there'll be more Mira. And hopefully she'll be more gay. I don't know. Fingers crossed. Anyway, my plans for the rest of the day are actually to finish this book. It's wild that I get to spend a day sat here reading a book and call it work. But I do. I'm going to do it. I'll come back to you once I've read the rest. Okay, I did it. I finished Fourth Wing. It took me 6 days of intense reading, but I did it. And you know what? I did not hate this book. I didn't love it. I don't think I'm going to rush to read the sequel. I'll probably just get my sister to tell me exactly what happens in the next 2 books, because I am intrigued. Like, I want to know what happens. I don't care enough to read it. Okay? That's where I'm at. Okay, the good, the bad, the ugly. We'll start with some of the good. For a fantasy, a high fantasy? Would this class as high fantasy? Maybe. It was a fairly easy read. Like, it was simplistic writing, and I don't say that as a negative necessarily, although it could also be a negative. It wasn't hard for me to like get into the book, and after a certain point, I think it was around 150-ish pages, I really started to get into it, and I read the last 400 pages of this book within about 2 days. So like there came a point, I think once the dragons got involved, I was hooked. I was like, I need to get to the end of this, and it doesn't feel like a chore. Easy, simple writing, easy to digest. What I'm about to say next might shock some of you, but I actually did really enjoy the romance in this book. I liked Xaden as a romantic male lead, which rarely happens. I always have criticisms about male romantic leads in books, but I don't have loads of critiques about him. I thought he was a well-rounded character. He's like supposed to be like a dark, mysterious, aloof guy, and he is that. But when it actually comes to Violet and his love or not love for her, he does protect her, he cares for her, it's very obvious that he cares for her. He has quite open communication. I don't want to spoil the book, but like when it comes to their relationship, the two of them, he's quite open with his communication. He's very honest about what he's wanting and what he's looking for. And Violet is also the same. On page 424, I've literally got a post-it note here that just says communication, because Violet is literally saying straight up, like, here is where I'm at with where we are. I don't like what you're doing, so I'm going to pull myself back. I will come to you when I'm ready to, like, see if this can go any further. But right now, I'm worried you're going to hurt me, so I'm just going to step back a second. And Xaden's like, yeah, that's fine. I understand. Cool. There's no miscommunication. There's no, like, not really a third act breakup kind of plot. They're just two adults talking about their relationship very openly, very honestly. And I really like that. But one thing I will say is that when we finally got to the sex scene in this book, I think it took like 450 pages before they had sex for the first time. Honestly, the anticipation was killing me at that point. Like, I was like, they just need to do it already, because I'm going to throw this book out of a window if they don't, because the sexual tension was just like so high. It was like bouncing off the page, which again, you could argue that's quite good writing. When they finally had sex, so Violet's whole thing is that she's disabled. Again, I think I said in my previous first half review that they don't specify what her disability is, but it's something like Ehlers-Danlos-esque. She's got like weak joints, weak bones. She like struggles to like grip onto the back of her dragon because her like thighs can't grip properly. But apparently that's no problem when it comes to them having sex. The sex they have is destructive. It is violent, not violent, but like, you get what I mean. There's like throwing around, they're like going at it. There's limbs being splayed in all different directions. It's explicit, okay? It's very explicit. But at no point is there any allowance made for the fact that Violet is very clearly disabled. Like, her entire thing is that she's very fragile. But yeah, during the sex scene, apparently she just isn't disabled anymore, and Xaden can do whatever he wants with all of her joints and all of her limbs, and there's no problem. And that is all I could think about through the sex scene finally happening. I was like, but she's disabled. And not to like be like, she can't do that because she's disabled. Of course, disabled people can have sex. But it was just like unbelievable considering how she's described in the rest of the book. I was a bit like, took me out of the story a bit. And Xaden doesn't even check in with her to be like, are you okay? Which I just thought was very un-Xaden-like. I had a problem with that. Oh my god, and that's just reminded me as well, maybe slight spoiler, but not really a spoiler for like the actual plot. It turns out, so Xaden and Violet have dragons. They're like bonded to two dragons, and then the two dragons they're bonded to are bonded to each other. And when the two bonded dragons have sex, Xaden and Violet also can feel that they're having sex and get intensely turned on themselves. And you know what? That just made me very uncomfortable. I don't think there was a reason. I don't think there was a need. I don't think we needed them to be turned on when the dragons are turned on. It did kind of lead to the moment where they first kissed, like they first gave in to their attraction to each other. But I just think there were so many other ways to do it than they're turned on because their dragons are currently going at it somewhere else and their like mental bond makes them also horny. I did not like that. That made me deeply, deeply uncomfortable. That is where I put the book down for a night and just stepped away for a bit because I was like, oh, I don't like that. There are a couple more mentions of gayness in this book, but it's not anything to write home about. There is a point where Rhiannon and Tara are brought up again, only for Rhiannon to be like, oh yeah, we've broken up until Parapet again, and that's it. So they're mentioned twice in passing. So it's mentioned that Tara likes Rhiannon, and then it's mentioned that something happened between them, and then the third time it's like, oh yeah, we're broken up. And the story's not about Rhiannon and about her love life, but you hear so much in this book about Violet and Xaden and about their attraction to each other, and Rhiannon's always checking in with Violet to be like, what's going on? Like, what's happening there? And not at any point does Violet ask Rhiannon back to be like, what's going on with you and Tara? Just bad friendship, but also like, there was no need. It's just like very much like, I'm just going to throw in this gay character, but I'm going to not expand on them in any way whatsoever. They're just there. And I'm going to mention it thrice, just thrice. There is also another female character, Quinn, I think she was called, who also gets just like a blink and you miss it mention of a girlfriend. No gay men. No gay men at all, actually, which is very interesting. It's kind of one of those cases which I spoke about in depth in my Should Straight Authors Write Queer Characters video that I uploaded a few weeks ago. It's like, should we be grateful that queer characters are mentioned and normalised in this fantasy world? Yes. And I think in a fantasy book you do get a bit more of a pass anyway, because it is very easy in fantasy to just like not have a homophobic world, and in this it's just very much like normalised. There's no eyebrows raised, there's no questioning, like Rhiannon just likes Tara and Quinn's got a girlfriend. But it's so blink and you miss it. Like there's no expansion on it whatsoever, which is frustrating as a queer reader, because I'm like, I would like to see a bit more. Like, why mention it if you're just going to brush past it so quickly? I don't know, it is a double-edged sword. Like, I'm grateful for gayness existing in this universe, but also it's so blink and you miss it. I'm kind of like, it doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. Also, for a world that clearly does not have homophobia, the patriarchy is rife. The patriarchy is very rife in this book. Maybe it's not as rife as it is in like this world, but it is still very much a situation in which the men are the strong ones being tasked with the job of looking after the women, especially Violet, because she is described as a very like fragile, dainty creature, and she needs all the men to look after her. But like she doesn't. She's a rider, like she has a dragon. She's fine. So yeah, the best parts of this book are without a doubt the dragons and the romance. The world building, like the fantasy world, I am still so lost. I finished this book. I could not explain to you how any of the world works. Like, the premise, I think, is there's this big war. So they live in a place called Navarre, and outside of the walls of Navarre is a big war going on, and they're like trying to protect their city and their land. I think. I know so little about this war. I don't know what caused it. I don't know what's going on. It's sort of like, again, spoilers. I don't want to go too deep into it, but I was kind of like, I don't understand. They're like training on these dragons. They're training to fight, but I don't understand what they're fighting for or about. I don't get it. Also, the magic, the like, what are they called? The signets, and like each person gets a different signet, which is like a different like massive power. So there's like ice wielding and mind reading and all these different powers that you can get. I don't really understand how all of that works. Like, this is a 600-page book. You would think I would get to the end of it and have more of an idea of, like, how this world works. I don't understand how the school year was laid out. I don't think I understood any of that, really, until, like, a solid 450 pages in. Basically, they join the school year and they've got to go over something called the parapet, which is, like, they've got to climb over a parapet, and if they don't die, then cool, they're accepted into the school. And after that, there are all these, like, different challenges throughout the year, in which they may or may not die, and they've got to pass all these challenges to like get their dragon and then train on their dragon and learn to ride and get their signet and all this. And it was just very convoluted, very complicated. I didn't really understand what was going on at all. And I feel like something like that is so easily solved with just like a letter in the beginning of the book. Like, when they've got the map. So they've got a map, a world map, which I did not refer to at all in hindsight, but again, it doesn't really matter. But like, why not have like an acceptance letter? Be like, Violet, we are accepting you to the Riders Quadrant for the first year. Like, if you pass the parapet, here's what your year is going to look like. These are all the challenges that you've got to overcome. Like, why not have something like that in the beginning of the book that the reader can refer back to and be like, hey, next it's that, and then it's that, and then it's that. Because I was just so lost. They talk about like war games and threshing and parapet, and I don't know what any of these words mean, and I'm not a fantasy girly, and I'm probably not as easily, like, I don't fall into it as easily as probably regular fantasy readers do, but like, it needs to be accessible, and I just didn't feel it was very accessible. But also in some other aspects it was very simple writing, but the world was very convoluted. Does that make sense? Also, I do stand by what I said in the first half of this review. The dialogue in this book is so out of place. We're in some sort of like high fantasy world. We're not on this earth, I don't think. And they're using Gen Z dialogue. It was just so out of place. It kept taking me out of it, because I was like, it just doesn't feel like this is how these teenagers would speak. But they were. Are they even teenagers? I don't know, like early 20s? Maybe. I have no idea how old they were. So, in conclusion, was this a relatively light read? Yes. Was it an easy read? Maybe. Am I intrigued to find out what happens? Yes. Am I going to read the sequel? No, I'm just going to text my sister and get her to tell me what happens in the next 2 books because I don't think I can continue with this. But am I sad that I did it? No. Was it a terrible time? No. Did I love it? No. Like 2.5 stars. 2.5 stars, that's all I'm giving it. Maybe 3 stars if I'm feeling really generous, but like 2.5 feels correct. And with that, tonight I'm beginning A Court of Thorns and Roses. Wish me luck. You know what, on reflection, oh, there's a cat here in my microphone, nice. Upon reflection, I think I was a bit harsh on Fourth Wing. I think I was harsh. I actually quite enjoyed that in comparison to how much I'm hating every second of A Court of Thorns and Roses. This book is genuinely terrible. It is so bad. And I am baffled at the amount of people that seem to love it. I do not understand why people enjoy this so much. I don't get it. I put it on Instagram and I had about 70% of people agreeing with me, saying that they also hated this book. I had like 5% of people saying like, oh no, it's incredible. And then I had the other, I've forgotten what numbers I said, 25%? I don't know numbers. I had the rest of people being like, oh yeah, it gets good in part 2 though. Like the second book is so much better. And here is my hot take of the year, of the video. I don't care how good book 2 is, of any series, if the first book is bad. This is your introduction to the world. This is like, you're supposed to impress me the most with this book, so I want to keep on reading. I don't care if book 2's good. I'm not persevering. I'm not continuing. Anyway, I am over halfway through this book. I'm on page 273, and I figured it's time for a midpoint, 3/4 point, 2/3 point check-in. The plot of this book is absolutely absurd. I don't understand. I am 273 pages in and nothing has happened. Nothing interesting has happened in this book whatsoever. Our main character is a human, a mortal called Feyre, I think is how you pronounce it. And she was out hunting in the woods one day. She is a huntress, like her family lost their fortune and now they're super poor, living in a cabin in the woods. It is up to her and her alone to like feed her family and keep them alive, even though she is the youngest or the middle child. Nobody else makes any effort, it's just her trying to keep everyone alive. And then one day she's out hunting in the woods and she accidentally kills a fairy, and then like the next day a different fairy turns up at her cabin and is like, how dare you, that goes against the treaty between the fairies and the humans because they like live in different worlds, and I should kill you, but I'm not going to kill you, I'm just going to force you to come live with me in fairyland instead. I can't even remember what the fairy world is called. I don't know, but he basically forces her to come live with him in fairyland because of like a loophole in the law, like he doesn't want to kill her because he's a nice fairy. So he just like makes her live with him in his house. And the entire plot of the book, the entire plot is this. Girl is mad, there are consequences for her actions. Girl decides to try and escape. Oh wait, no, maybe I'm not going to escape, maybe I'm going to stay here. Girl decides to escape. Oh wait, no, maybe not, maybe I'll stay here. Girl blatantly ignores every rule that's been set in place for her and puts herself in trouble, and then is mad there are consequences for her actions. Girl tries to escape. Oh wait, no, she's not going to escape. Girl does something that she shouldn't be doing, and then is mad there are consequences for her actions. That is the entire plot of this book up to page 273. It is mind-numbing. Feyre is an awful character. She's 19 years old, I think, in this. She reads like a child, which is very jarring considering that she's supposedly falling in love with Tamlin, the fairy that she lives with, who is like a high lord of the Spring Court. I don't really know what that means, but he is. The chemistry between them is absolutely non-existent. Like they kiss for the first time and I was just like, oh, I feel nothing. I feel dead inside. This book has killed me inside. There's been some sort of spell put on the land, a blight maybe. Again, the magic in this I do not understand, at least in Fourth Wing. By like halfway through I was like, okay, I understand the magic, I understand how it all works, I get the world, I kind of understand what's going on. Still not entirely, but like I got it for the most part. In this I have no idea, literally not a clue. There's some sort of blight, some spell. I don't know if the spell and the blight are the same thing. But basically, all I've been able to gather is that this spell means that everyone in the Spring Court wears masks because the spell happened whilst they were all at a masquerade ball, and so the consequence is that they're not able to remove their masks. So Feyre's like fallen in love with Tamlin, but she doesn't know what he looks like. Apparently this is meant to be some sort of like Beauty and the Beast retelling, so I've seen online. It gives me nothing of Beauty and the Beast because Tamlin is objectively attractive. From like everything that is described of him, he is attractive. He is like fairy, but he has claws, but he doesn't have claws, and he can turn into a wolf, but he's not always a wolf. Like a lot of the time he's just a man, but he just got a mask on his face that he can't remove, so she doesn't know what he looks like, but she's fallen in love with him anyway. Maybe, I don't know. I have no idea. I do not understand. The things that I'm confused about, the things that I don't really understand about this book may well get tied up in the last 150 pages, but I just don't think that's good writing if that is what happens. Like, even if everything gets tied up in a neat little bow, ready to move on to the next book, I still don't think that'll be enough to redeem it, because I think by nearly page 300 in the book, you should understand kind of what's going on. You shouldn't be left completely confused. Like, it doesn't feel like as the reader you're being left in the dark because there's like some sort of mystery to uncover, which is like what a lot of books do. It just feels like bad writing. It just feels like things haven't been explained. There's no foreshadowing. There's no hints. It just feels like bad writing. And the writing in this is bad. Like, it is terrible. The writing in this is so stilted. It's so staccato. It's very like, Feyre did this, then she did this, then this happened, then Tamlin did this. It's just like, so... Do you get what I mean? Do you get what I mean? There's so many paragraphs, so many chapters that are just about nothing. Like, you could remove entire chapters from this book and it would make no difference to the storyline as a whole. It very much feels like Sarah J Maas was just trying to fill space, maybe to make the book a bit longer, because fantasy books are inherently always big, chunky, fat books. So maybe she was just trying to, like, fill space. I don't really know. It just, so much of this feels unnecessary. It feels like it really needed to be edited, like, a lot. Also, the amount of dashes and ellipses that are used in this book is absolutely insane. It is just not good writing. I've opened to a random page here. This is page 253. I'm going to count how many dashes are used here. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 dashes on page 253. And in terms of ellipses, 1, 2, 3, only 3 ellipses, but that is just on one page. If I count the page next to it as well, page 252, 4, 5, 6. 6 in a double page spread. Why? Why do you need to use so many ellipses? It is just really, really bad writing. I think I said when I was talking about Fourth Wing that I kind of understand why that book would be appealing to a booktok audience, why new readers might find that really, really compelling. And honestly, after reading this, I think I was too harsh on my Fourth Wing review. I actually did quite like it. I've been thinking about it a lot. I'm saying it. Fourth Wing was good. I might read the next one, Iron Flame. I might. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. There is not a chance in hell I'm going to be reading the second one of this. I don't even know what it's called. But yeah, I understand why Fourth Wing would capture a new reading audience, because it is compelling writing. It's a compelling storyline. Once I reached like page 150, I was all in on Fourth Wing. This, the writing's not good, and maybe it is the bad writing that pulls in an audience, because it's very easy to read, but also I don't think easy to read is the same as easy to understand, because just none of this makes sense. The book just does not make sense. The storyline doesn't make sense. There are some major pacing issues, some major plot holes, which, like I said, might get solved in the last 150 pages. But I cannot fathom why this book is so popular. I do not understand it. And that's not me shitting on anyone who really likes this. You do you, boo. I'll never judge people for reading. I think reading any book is better than reading no book. I just don't understand it. Like, am I supposed to believe that Feyre, this bratty human who can't follow a simple instruction, like stay in your room because you might die if you leave your room. Like, she is literally told, if you leave your room this night, there's a good chance you're going to die. And then at midnight, she's like, oh, I fancy a midnight snack, I'm just going to leave my room real quick. Like, am I supposed to believe that that girl single-handedly kept her family alive for the last 5 years? Also, there's just this really weird, not a side plot in this, but like part of the story, I guess, where Feyre, she's a huntress. She only wears tunics and trousers because it's easier to move in. And on the first night in the spring court, they try and get her to wear a dress. Like, her servant tries to get her to wear a dress, and she's like, no, because I need to be able to, like, move and run. She's like, oh, dresses, disgusting. I simply cannot wear a dress. And then inexplicably halfway through the book, when she decides that she likes Tamlin, suddenly, it's not really explained, but you assume that she does, she goes to her servant and she's like, I want to wear a dress now. And then she wears a dress to dinner and everyone's like, oh my god, she's a woman. She's a real woman. Because she's wearing a dress. Like, what in the misogyny is that? Like, what in the misogyny? Like, it's meant to be this massive, like, character growth moment for her because she submits to the patriarchy and decides to wear a dress. And then suddenly Tamlin fancies her a lot more, and Lucian, who's, like, Tamlin's best friend, I'm not really entirely sure what his role is also like, oh yeah, you're pretty. It really bothered me. I hated that. There's also a very questionable part in this where, as I mentioned before, Feyre leaves her room when she's been explicitly told not to go and get a midnight snack. She's cornered by Tamlin, and he's like, I could smell you. And then he bites her neck, just bites her, without consent. Like, he's, like, cornered her and bites her. And, like, I know he's, like, meant to be part animal, whatever, fairy, he's not human. But, like, what? Like, he's just biting her. And she's like, oh, yeah, bite me. It felt questionable. They hadn't even kissed at that point, by the way. He just, like, corners her and bites her neck, and then the next day she's like, I'm gonna show off the bruise so he feels bad about what he did. So clearly she didn't like it and didn't consent to it, but she's like, I'm gonna manipulate him. But then nothing ever comes of it. I don't like it. Also, 275 pages in, 73 pages in, not a single gay. None. Not a single mention. And I thought in fantasy, gayness and queerness was more normalised. I thought that was the whole thing about fantasy. Like, you don't need to make it a big part of the storyline. It's just like, in fantasy worlds, you can make it so homophobia and transphobia don't exist. But there's just no mention of it in this. It's so aggressively straight, and I do think I would enjoy this book a lot more if there was just some sort of gayness mentioned. Just anything. Just, like, mention a gay character, unless I've missed it because the writing is so dogshit poor, maybe. But where's my gays? Where's my gays? Give me something. Give me anything. Just a scrap of queerness, please. So yeah, I'm going to try and read the last 150 pages of this tonight. A thrilling Sunday night for me. I've just spotted on the back of this book, one of the reviews from Kirkus Reviews says sizzles with sexual tension. Girl, where? Where is the sizzling sexual tension? Because I have not felt a second of it, to be honest with you. Yeah, I'm going to go read this now. Wish me luck. I just want it to be over with. I just want it to be done. Okay, I finished it. I can confirm things did happen in the last 150 pages. I don't think I liked the things that happened, but things, they happened. How can a book be so dull and so boring and have literally nothing happen for nearly 300 pages and then have so much, too much happen in the last 150 pages? It's just bad pacing. I don't even know where to begin with talking about the rest of this book, and I think I am going to say right here, spoiler warning, because I don't think I can talk about the last 150 pages without giving some pretty major spoilers. So if you want to read this book and you don't want it to be spoiled, maybe skip to the end of this section, I guess. I'm not recommending you read this book, but spoilers. Spoiler alert. So I think where I left this off when I finished my last review is Feyre had been sent back to the human world by Tamlin because he was like, I can't keep you safe, you'll be safer with your family. So she is sent back to live with her parents or her dad and her sisters, even though she was told she would literally never ever see them again. And she really suffered with that. And then Tamlin was just like, yeah, you can go back. It's so fine. Just go. So I was a bit like, what? Okay? Like, what's going on? So she goes back. There's like a brief interlude where she's just like with her sisters, and then the sister that she has hated forever suddenly likes her now, which was a small gripe I had with this book. Like, they spent their entire lives hating each other, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, you're right, I've decided, you're fine now. But it's small. And then Feyre hears somehow through the grapevine, I can't remember how, that Fairyland, I still can't remember the name of the place, Prythian? Is it even similar to that? Something like that. She goes back to the fairyland because she is like, Tamlin's in trouble, but like she already knew that he was in trouble when she left fairyland. Also, it's even pronounced fairy, I've realised. Fairy? That's too similar to Feyre. I'm going to keep saying fairies. Faerie. I might be pronouncing it wrong. I'm sure I'm being shouted at in the comments if I am. She goes back to fairyland and then she arrives and the entire house has been ransacked and she's like, oh my god, something awful has happened. But like I said, she knew that something awful was going to happen. That's why she was sent back to the human world. So that wasn't a surprise. And then she runs into her old servant woman, Alice, and there's no piecing together of the clues here. Like, Feyre's not going through the house slowly piecing together, like, what's happened and using her memories and, like, the stuff that she learned while she was previously in this world to be like, okay, this is what I think's happened, this is where I think I need to go. Like, there's no, like, slow piecing together of the facts. No. She runs into her old servant, Alice, and Alice basically sits her down and monologues at her for, like, 4 pages, being like, here's the entire truth, here's the entire story. And let me tell you, as a reader, that is so unsatisfying to read. I was just like, oh, okay, we're just getting all the answers. All the answers were, like, there all along. Like, they could have told her in the beginning, but they didn't. Or maybe they couldn't have told her because of the spell. I don't really know. But just being monologued at for 4 pages is such an unsatisfying way to, like, find out what's going on in a book. Like, there should have been clues. There should have been pieces for, like, Feyre to put together. And she should have, like, gone out searching for Tamlin and like figured it out that way, or like use her own brains. But apparently Feyre doesn't have a brain, so maybe that was never possible. So basically Tamlin and Lucian have been kidnapped by Amarantha, who is this cartoon-esque villain. She is like so evil in a really cartoony way. There's no real like characterization to her other than the fact that she is just like evil and deranged. And honestly, love that for her. She was kind of iconic, but like she was not a good villain. Like she was so over-exaggerated and it was so obvious that she was meant to be this really awful person, and like there was no depth to her, there were no layers, she was just evil. So she has to go under the mountain, which is where Amarantha is keeping Tamlin and Lucian and like all of the fairies and all of the courts, because she is now like taken over big time. And then when she gets there, Tamlin won't even look at her because men are trash. And she basically ends up making a deal with Amarantha that she is going to complete 3 challenges. And if she completes all 3 challenges, then Amarantha will let Tamlin or like let everyone go. But like I just don't understand why it would be so easy. Like it just felt too easy for Feyre to like save everyone. Actually, no, it was either you've got to do these 3 challenges and like survive and complete the challenges, or you've simply got to answer a riddle. Now let me tell you, I'm not good at riddles. I'm not, like, that's not how my brain works. I read this riddle in this book and I could immediately tell you the answer to it because it was the most cliche, ridiculous answer to any riddle I've ever heard in my entire life. I read it, I was like, that's the answer. I was like, it makes sense with the storyline, and also it's just cliche. And then, was I correct? Yes. Should I tell you it? No, I won't. I won't tell you the answer to the riddle, but you can probably read it and figure it out yourself. And the fact that it took Feyre until the very end of the book to be like, I know the answer to the riddle. Like, girl. Like I said, she's got no brain. There's nothing going on up there. So while she's waiting to complete these 3 tasks because she can't figure out this riddle, this very easy riddle, she is trapped in a cell, and like each task happened on the full moon, so over 3 months. And in this time, Rhysand, who is the other potential love interest, I assume, like the dark king of the night court or high lord of the night court, he keeps coming into her room and just being like creepy, and then he starts taking her out of the cell to go to these like big parties where like Amarantha's there at these parties and knows that Feyre is being taken out of the cell, but like she doesn't care for some reason. She's not being treated as a prisoner, like she's allowed to just like come out and socialise and be in this party. I don't really know. At these parties, which Feyre is taken out of her cell for every single night, she's basically painted head to toe in this like oily paint so nobody can touch her. Like Rhysand's like, I want you covered in this paint so I know if somebody's tried to touch you. And then he takes her to these parties. Like, I suppose, like, the paint, like, you'd think that's noble. You think that's, like, nice that he's, like, painting her to make sure nobody's touching her. It's not, because he's allowed to touch her. It's like, so nobody apart from me touches you. Like, I can assault you is fine. Also the clothes, like the dress that she is forced to wear, is described as barely covers her, like it covers her breasts and like hangs between her crotch, but she's wearing nothing else, and it is literally commented on that people can see a lot more than they bargained for. So she's basically forced to come out of her cell, be stripped naked and painted, then the dress she's wearing is so revealing that people can see everything. It is so, like, I felt so bad for her. Like, it was so dehumanizing. It was awful. And but like, we're supposed to be thinking this, like, Rysand is a legitimate, like, love interest, love potential at this point. Like, that's what it's going for. I'm not going to read the rest of the books, I don't know, but I can only assume that he is. And then when she gets to said parties, she's forced by Rysand to drink the fairy wine, which is she's basically being roofied, because she drinks this fairy wine and then forgets everything. She wakes up the next morning in her cell with no memory, covered in sick, like vomiting into the corner of her cell. And she has no memory of what she's done the night before, but she can, like, tell from her pain that she hasn't been touched. And then she has, like, flashbacks, and she's being forced to, like, dance and gyrate on Rysand's lap. And correct me if I'm wrong, is that not still some form of assault? She is being roofied every single night. Every night she's being roofied. And she can't remember anything. And that is not a problem. Like, that is not an issue in the book. There's no, like, big, like, outrage over Feyre being like, I can't believe you're roofing me. She's just like, okay, yeah, cool. And then I went back and reread the scene that I referenced in my last clip where Tamlin basically corners Feyre and bites her neck, and I was like, is that sexual assault? It is definitely sexual assault, because whilst he's doing it, Feyre is literally saying, let me go, I want to go, let go of me. And Tamlin doesn't. He, like, corners her and then bites her. That is sexual assault. That, combined with the roofing and the nakedness, the degradation, Sarah J. Maas, like, what the fuck? What the actual fuck? Oh my god, I forgot to talk about maybe the worst thing. Actually, no, it's not worse than sexual assault. That is probably the worst thing in this book. But the second worst thing in this book, it turns out that the entire reason that Feyre was brought to Fairyland, Prythian, who knows, is a lie. All of it was a lie. Tamlin's entire thing was a lie. He sent the fairy out into the woods specifically for Feyre or for another human to kill him, and then the entire thing about there being a treaty where humans aren't allowed to kill fairies and then he had to take her hostage, all a lie. Everything. I understand the premise of there, like, having to be plot lines in a book and, like, plot twists. I get it. That's not my issue with this. My issue is when Feyre goes back to Fairyland and Alice tells her all of this and tells her, like, all of this was a ruse. Like, you were supposed to fall in love with Tamlin because then the spell would be broken. The spell could only be broken if a human who had hatred in her heart for fairies fell in love with him and kissed him and told him, I love you. When Alice tells Feyre all of this, Feyre at no point is like, oh my god, I was duped. Like, I was tricked into this. Like, Tamlin never had proper feelings for me. He just wanted to, like, save himself and his land of his curse. At no point does she question it for even a second. She's just like, oh my god, I'm in love with him. I need to go save him. Like, I'm sorry. If that was me, maybe I'm selfish. If that was me and I found myself in that situation and I realised that I had been ripped away from my family, from my world, I had been sexually assaulted in this house full of fairies and strangers, and I'd been nearly attacked multiple times when I'm just, like, wandering the grounds, I would be like, fuck him, fuck that, I've been used, I'm just a pawn in his game, I'm going back to live with my parents, and that's it. But no, she hears that and is somehow like, I need to go save him. And so then she, like, marches off to under the mountain and then goes through all of these challenges to try and save this guy who just tricked her for multiple months. Do we even know if Tamlin's in love with her? I don't think he is. And I think that's probably a big plot point in the second book. I'll never know. Tell me, guys, leave in the comments down below. Has Tamlin just been duping her this entire time? Has he really got no feelings for her whatsoever? Is Tamlin a bad guy? I think he's a bad guy. And if that is correct, which I would hazard a guess that it probably is, books shouldn't be that predictable. But, like, Feyre's entire motivations in this, they're just not believable whatsoever. Like, any other character in any other story would hear the truth that they had been duped. And they would have a moment of reflection and being, like, upset about what had happened. Even if ultimately she did go to try and save him, not for him, but for the greater good. You would have a moment of reflection there. There was no moment of reflection. She just marches off into the mountain and is like, I still love you. Why? He tricked you. Like, how do you even know that his feelings for you are real? They can't be. Like, the curse, the spell was never that Tamlin had to fall in love with her. It's just that she had to fall in love with Tamlin, and that was it. You will be shocked to hear that the writing did not improve in the last part of the book. It maybe got a bit more exciting, a bit more fast-paced. The writing, still objectively bad. On multiple occasions, Feyre's watery bowels are referred to. I shit you not. Watery bowels. Like, she is so scared she is going to shit herself, but like, surely there is a better way to word that than watery bowels. My bowels turned watery. I couldn't help it. A massive overarching problem in this book is the sheer lack of representation. There is no queer representation in this. There are no people of colour. There's no disability. There's nothing. And you could argue that, like, it's in a mythical world, like the people of colour representation, and I did see somebody arguing this online, are the fact there are like different types of fairies, but a good chunk of this is set in the mortal world as well, and there is no representation in that. There's no disability, there's not a single whispering of queerness, there is just nothing in this book. Oh, actually, I lie, Lucian does have a fake magical metal fairy eye because his eye got ripped out. That could, I suppose, does count as disability representation. But that is it. Like, I do kind of understand the argument in fantasy worlds those things are less relevant because they're not an issue. Like, if you're going to create a fantasy world, why create a world where there is homophobia and racism and ableism? Like, it just doesn't make sense to have that in a fantasy world. But like in Fourth Wing, for example, which I am now a big fan of after reading this. I was way too harsh on Fourth Wing. I should have read this first. I think I would have actually loved Fourth Wing after reading this first. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, they do have the queer representation in Fourth Wing. They have a couple of characters with girlfriends, which I would have liked to have seen further developed, don't get me wrong, but like, at least they're there, at least they exist in that world. In this world, nothing. Just straight up nothing. And as a queer reader, it is nice to see yourself reflected on the pages of the books you're reading, even if it is just in passing. It's better to exist a little bit than not exist at all. And that is my perspective as a queer person. I'm sure other minorities also would probably feel the same way about seeing themselves reflected on the pages of books. Or maybe not, but that's my opinion. Anyway, I gave this a 1-star review. I just thought this was awful. I thought it had so many problems. I just don't think it's good writing. Like, if you're going to write a problematic book, at least write it well, you know? This is problematic in so many ways. And it's badly written. The ellipses, the dashes. Oh my god, it is just bad writing. It's just bad. It's just bad writing, guys. I do not recommend this. I think if you're going to read a fantasy book, it is worth reading Fourth Wing. I'm intrigued by that one. I might read the second one. I don't know. I've got so many books to read. Do I care enough? Maybe. I liked Fourth Wing. I just don't think I like fantasy as a whole. I hate this. I hate this. It's so bad. So there you go, there is this queer girl's opinion on 2 of the most popular romantasy books of the moment. Go wild in the comments, I give you permission. A massive thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Please do not forget to check out the link in the description box for your 1-month free trial. Skillshare is so worth it. Like, it's just so good to learn something new, and if you can do that for free for a month, why wouldn't you? Thank you so much for watching. If you guys have any ideas or requests for books that you want me to read in the series going forward, then please leave them in the comments down below. I know, like, these videos are painful for me, but also they're really fun to film. I really enjoy filming them. So let me know, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys. What was that? Okay. I'm going insane. Romantasy has set me insane.